Chapter 11 of The People of the Crater by Andre Norton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 11. Thrala's Mate. Although there were falls of rock within the caverns and some of the passages were closed, few of the folk suffered injury. Gibbie scouts reported that the land about the entrance to the caves had sunk, and that the river of gold, thrown out of its bed, was fast filling this basin to form a lake. As far as they could discover, none of the Black Ones had survived the battle and the sealing of the caves. But they could not be sure that there was not a handful of outlaws somewhere within the confines of Tav. The crater itself was changed. A series of raw hills had appeared in the central plain. The pool of boiling mud had vanished, and trees in the forest lay flat, as if cut by a giant scythe. Upon their return to the cliff city, the Gibbie found most of their wax skyscrapers in ruins, but they set about rebuilding without complaint. The squirrel farmers emerged from their burrows and were again busy in the fields. Garin felt out of place in all the activity that filled the caverns. More than ever, he was the outlander with no true roots in Tav. Restlessly he explored the caverns, spending many hours in the place of ancestors, where he studied those men of the outer world who had preceded him into this weird land. One night when he came back to his chamber, he found Dantan and Turar awaiting him there. There was a curious hardness in Dantan's attitude, a somber sobriety in Turar's carriage. "Have you sought the Hall of Women since the battle?" demanded the son of the Ancient Ones abruptly. "No," retorted Garin shortly. "Did Dantan accuse him of double-dealing? Have you sent a message to Thrala?" Garin held back his rising anger. "I have not ventured where I can not." Dantan nodded to Turar as if his suspicions had been confirmed. "You see how it stands, Turar." Turar shook his head slowly. "But never has the summoning been at fault." "You forget," Dantan reminded him sharply. "It was once, and the penalty was exacted. So shall it be again." Garin looked from one to the other, confused. Dantan seemed possessed by a certain ruthless anger, but Turar was manifestly unhappy. "It must come after council, the daughter willing," the lord of the folk said. Dantan strode to the door. "Thrala is not to know. Assemble the council tonight. Meanwhile, see that he jerked his thumb toward Garin, does not leave this room." Thus Garin became a prisoner under the guard of the folk, unable to discover of what Dantan accused him, or how he had aroused the hatred of the cavern ruler. Unless Dantan's jealousy had been aroused, and he was determined to rid himself of a rival. Believing this, the flyer went willingly to the chamber where the judges waited. Dantan sat at the head of a long table, Turar to his right hand and lesser nobles of the folk beyond. "You know the charge." Dantan's words were tipped with venom as Garin came to stand before him. "Out of his own mouth has this outlander condemned himself. Therefore I ask that you decree for him the fate of that outlander of the second calling who rebelled against the summoning." "The outlander has admitted his fault?" questioned one of the folk. Turar inclined his head sadly. "He did." As Garin opened his mouth to demand a stating of the charge against him, Dantan spoke again. "What say you, lords?" For a long moment they sat in silence, and then they bobbed their lizard heads in assent. "Do as you desire, dweller in the light." Dantan smiled without mirth. "Look, outlander." He passed his hand over the glass of the seeing mirror set in the tabletop. "This is the fate of him who rebels." In the shining surface Garin saw pictured a break in Tav's wall. At its foot stood a group of men of the Ancient Ones, and in their midst struggled a prisoner. They were forcing him to climb the crater wall. Garin watched him reach the lip and crawl over, to stagger across the steaming rock, dodging the scalding vapor of hot springs, until he pitched face down in the slimy mud. Such was his ending, and so will you end." The calm brutality of that statement aroused Garin's anger. "Rather would I die that way than linger in this den," he cried hotly. "You, who owe your life to me, would send me to such a death without even telling me of what I am accused? Little is there to choose between you and Kepta after all, except that he was an open enemy." Danton sprang to his feet, but Terrar caught his arm. "He speaks fairly. Ask him why he will not fulfill the summoning." While Danton hesitated, Garin leaned across the table, flinging his words weapon-like straight into that cold face. "I admit that I love Thrala, have loved her since that moment when I saw her on the steps of the Margel pit in the caves. Since when has it become a crime to love that which may not be yours, if you do not try to take it?" Terrar released Danton, his golden eyes gleaming. "If you love her, claim her. It is your right." "Do I not know," Garin turned to him, "that she is Danton's? Thrawn had no idea of Danton's survival when he laid his will upon her. Shall I stoop to holding her to an unwelcome bargain? Let her go to the one she loves." Danton's face was livid, and his hands, resting on the table, trembled. One by one, the large of the folk slipped away, leaving the two face to face. "And I thought to order you to your death." Danton's whisper was husky as it emerged from his dry lips. "Garin, we thought you knew, and knowing, had refused her." "Knew what?" "That I am Thrawn's son, and Thrala's brother." The floor swung beneath Garin's unsteady feet. Danton's hands were warm on his shoulders. "I am a fool," said the American slowly. Danton smiled. "A very honorable fool. Now get you to Thrala, who deserves to hear the full of this tangle." So it was that, with Danton by his side, Garin walked for the second time down that hallway to pass the golden curtains and stand in the presence of the daughter. She came straight from her cushions into his arms when she read what was in his face. They needed no words. And in that hour began Garin's life in Tav. End of chapter 11. End of The People of the Crater by Andre Norton.